Imagine pouring a refreshing glass of water, maybe a comforting cup of coffee, or, even a celebratory beer. It's a simple everyday thing, right? You probably don't give it a second thought. But what if I told you that with every single sip, something else, something invisible, insidious, pervasive, and potentially harmful was also getting into your body? Today on the Deep Dive, we're really plunging into the startling reality of microplastic and nanoplastic contamination. Not just in our drinks, it's everywhere. Our mission: to uncover these hidden threats, their profound, often really shocking implications, and give you a shortcut to understanding this urgent global challenge. Okay, let's unpack this invisible invader that's literally all around us and increasingly inside us.
Yeah, it's truly remarkable how our whole understanding of this problem has shifted. It used to feel like this distant environmental issue, but now it's become incredibly personal, affecting us directly. So first off, let's just clarify what we're actually talking about. Microplastics, they're tiny plastic fragments, generally less than 5 millimeters long, think smaller than a sesame seed. But then you have nanoplastics. These are even tinier, less than 1 micrometer. I mean, a human hair is about 70 micrometers thick, just for perspective. So these particles are genuinely too small to see, smell, or taste. They're a silent, pervasive threat you just can't detect with your senses. And size really matters here. Nanoplastics, because they're so ultra-small, are much more likely to actually enter the human body, get into tissues, vital organs. That massively amplifies their potential toxicity.
Wow. When you put it like that, the invisibility really sinks in. And the scale of it just feels almost impossible to wrap your head around, doesn't it?
It absolutely is huge. I mean, look at the numbers. Globally, we're producing something like 265 million metric tons of plastic waste every single year. And a huge chunk of that, somewhere between, say, 4.8 and 12.7 million metric tons, ends up in our oceans annually. Scientists now estimate the oceans contain a staggering 5 to 51 trillion plastic particles. It's not just litter on the beach, it's a systemic challenge. It comes from land-based waste, marine industries, discarded fishing gear. It really shows this isn't something individuals can fix just by changing their habits. We need large-scale efforts, government regulation.
What's really striking and honestly a bit chilling is that this situation with microplastics, it echoes some historical events where widely used substances turned out to have severe, unforeseen consequences. I'm thinking specifically about the thalidomide tragedy. Late 50s, early 60s, thalidomide was first sold as a tranquilizer and then, incredibly, as a cure for morning sickness. It was prescribed in dozens of countries without proper testing on pregnant women. The result was devastating. Over 10,000 children born worldwide with severe deformities. It was actually Dr. Francis Kelsey at the US FDA who fought to deny its approval in the States, which thankfully prevented a similar catastrophe there. So why bring up this specific historical event in relation to tiny plastic particles? How is it relevant?
Well, it raises a really crucial question, doesn't it? Could microplastics be the new thalidomide of the 21st century? The thalidomide disaster forced massive changes in drug regulations. Much stricter testing, more transparency required before new things hit the market. It really highlights what we call the precautionary principle. Basically, the idea that we need to be cautious, really understand the potential health impacts before we widely introduce new substances or technologies. Of course, science gives us amazing accidental discoveries too, like, the microwave oven or penicillin. But there's always that risk of unintended harm. This whole microplastic issue, it's a recurring theme in technological progress. It demands we be proactive about safety, not just reactive after harm is done.
Okay, so given this pervasive threat and the need for precaution, where are these invisible invaders actually sneaking into our daily lives, especially our drinks? Let's start with something many of us reach for thinking it's pure, safe: bottled water. I remember older research, maybe 2018, suggesting around 300 microplastic particles per liter, which already sounds like a lot, but then a newer groundbreaking study came out with numbers that just blew that away.
Oh, absolutely. That recent study from Columbia and Rutgers universities, they used new laser-based methods to see much smaller particles. They found an average of around 240,000 detectable plastic fragments per liter in bottled water.
240,000.
Yes. It's staggering. That's 10 to 100 times more than we thought based on older estimates. And the critical part, about 90% of these newly found particles were nanoplastics. This completely changes our understanding of the scale. It suggests we've been seriously underestimating how much plastic humans are exposed to. There's also research by Orb Media looking at 11 different brands, finding widespread contamination. Some bottles had over 10,000 particles per liter. Now, some brands acknowledged finding microplastics but disputed those really high numbers. Still, the implication is stark. If you drink just 1 liter of bottled water a day, you could be ingesting tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of these particles every year. It really challenges that perception of bottled water as a pure, clean choice, doesn't it?
It really does. It's incredible. And you'd naturally think the bottle itself is the main culprit, right? But here's a twist that really surprised me. It's not just the bottle degrading. A big source is actually the screw cap.
Right. It's fascinating how even just simple, everyday actions contribute in unexpected ways. There was a study, I think, in the Journal of Water and Health that looked at this. The repeated twisting motion, screwing the cap on and off, it creates friction. And that friction generates a significant number of microplastics. They estimated around 500 particles per twist.
Per twist, wow.
Yeah. Those particles then fall into the water. Often, this ends up being a larger source of contamination than the plastic breaking down from the bottle itself. It just makes the problem feel even more immediate somehow.
Okay, so I'm definitely going to be thinking about that every time I open a bottle now. But get ready for an even bigger shocker, especially if you thought, okay, I'll just switch to glass bottles. Problem solved.
Ah, yes, the glass bottle assumption. This really highlights how deeply embedded these plastics are, even where we least expect them. So a French agency, ALNT, did this study. And unbelievably, they found that drinks in glass bottles often contain more microplastic particles than drinks in plastic bottles, cartons, or cans.
More in glass? How is that even possible?
It sounds counterintuitive, I know. But things like cola, lemonade, iced tea, beer in glass bottles averaged around 100 microplastic particles per liter. That was 5 to 50 times higher than the same drinks in plastic or cans.
So where are they coming from if not the bottle?
The main source identified was the paint used on the metal bottle caps.
The paint?
Yeah, the friction during storage, maybe transport, rubs off tiny paint particles. And these microplastics found in the drinks actually matched the color and chemical makeup of the cap paint. Interestingly, water and wine in glass had fewer particles, often because wine uses cork stoppers, not painted metal caps. The study did find a potential fix, though cleaning the caps thoroughly before sealing the bottles significantly cut down the particle count.
That is genuinely astonishing. I, like probably many listeners, just assumed glass was inherently safer. Okay, what about hot drinks, my daily coffee or tea fix on the go? Are those paper cups okay?
Well, recent research isn't great news there either. Those typical to-go cups, the paper ones lined with plastic, they leach microplastics too. Specifically, polyethylene-coated paper cups can release anywhere from, say, 675 up to almost 6,000 plastic particles per liter into your hot drink.
Thousands, just from a cup.
Yeah, especially at typical hot beverage temperatures like 70 to 95 degrees Celsius. And acidic drinks, maybe like some teas or even coffee, seem to encourage even more release than just plain hot water. And it's not just the cups. Those convenient coffee capsules or pods, they've been shown to release estrogenic chemicals. Things like BPA, bisphenol A, and benzophenone. These are known endocrine disruptors, meaning they mess with your hormones. The high temperature and pressure during brewing seems to be the issue there. So yeah, temperature and the drink's chemistry definitely play a role in making plastic leaching worse.
It's becoming alarmingly clear this isn't just about one or two types of drinks. It feels like microplastics are truly ubiquitous.
They really are. It's not confined to water or hot beverages. They've found them in carbonated soft drinks, in ice packs. Beer, surprisingly, often shows some of the highest levels compared to other drinks like cold tea or energy drinks. They've also been found in drinks that come in those refrigerated polypropylene bottles, that's the plastic often labeled PP. Across the board, the average microplastic concentration in beverages generally is around 183 particles per liter, based on current findings. Stepping back, it just means this problem affects almost everyone, no matter what you prefer to drink. It's systemic, impacting nearly all packaged liquids.
So, okay, they're literally in our drinks in these huge numbers. Where else? How else are they getting into our lives? It feels inescapable at this point.
It does feel that way, and that's because the contamination happens at so many points. It's throughout the product life cycle and through environmental pathways. Avoidance is extremely difficult. Microplastics get into our food chain during production, processing, packaging, storage. Think about excessive packaging, long processing times, long-term storage. It all contributes. And beyond the packaging itself, these plastics are constantly moving through the environment. We talked about the trillions in the oceans, but they also get into soil and, crucially, into the air we breathe.
How do they get into the air?
A big source is synthetic clothing fibers. When we do laundry, tiny fibers shed, and many pass right through wastewater treatment into rivers and oceans. But also, just drying synthetic clothes, especially in vented dryers, releases fibers directly into the air. There was a study in Paris that estimated between 3 and 10 tons of microplastics fall in the city every year, like this invisible plastic dust.
Tons just falling from the sky.
Exactly. It underscores the need for systemic changes. Better materials, better production, better supply chains. Because even if you try really hard to avoid direct plastic contact, you're still being exposed through the environment.
That's deeply unsettling. So it's not just drinks. Our entire diet seems compromised.
Yeah, the sheer breadth of contamination is what's really striking. It makes it immediate and relatable for everyone, no matter what you eat. Microplastics have been found in so many common foods: salt, sugar, honey, tea, coffee, milk, yogurt, meat, canned fish, condiments. The list goes on. Shellfish, like mussels, oysters, clams, they often have high levels because we eat them whole, digestive tracts included. Research has found them in eggs, mostly concentrated in the yolk. Even fruits and vegetables aren't safe. Nanoplastics have been found in produce. Apples were apparently the most contaminated in one study, but also things like broccoli and carrots.
Even fruit and veg.
Possibly absorbed from contaminated soil or water. Then there are processed foods. Things like fish sticks, chicken nuggets, tofu, even plant-based burgers. They tend to contain significantly more microplastics per gram than less processed foods. Rice is another one. Studies found maybe 3 to 4 milligrams of plastic per 100 grams of cooked rice. But for instant rice, it jumped to 13 milligrams per serving.
Wow.
And table salt. A global study found 94% of tested salt brands contained microplastics. The average is over 140 particles per kilogram.
It's almost overwhelming hearing all this. I imagine many listeners are feeling a bit powerless right now, but it all leads to the crucial question. What are these tiny particles actually doing once they get inside our bodies?
Right. And this paints a picture of just unavoidable continuous exposure. The cumulative burden on our health is likely growing exponentially. Ingestion is the main way we're exposed. Estimates suggest we consume somewhere between 46,000 and 52,000 particles annually, maybe even a weekly intake averaging over 200,000 particles. Food and drinks are major sources.
200,000 a week.
That's one recent estimate, yeah. And this intake seems to have skyrocketed, maybe a 6-fold increase globally just since 1990. We also inhale them, remember. They're in the air, we breathe them in, or they land on food and we swallow them. And this burden isn't spread evenly. There are real global equity issues here. Southeast Asian countries seem to have the highest consumption rates, maybe 50 times higher than 1990 levels in some places. Indonesia apparently leads, with estimates around 15 grams per person per month.
15 grams? Like plastic?
Yes, largely linked to seafood-heavy diets, which can account for 70% of exposure in those regions. Inhalation exposure also varies wildly. China and Mongolia seem to have the highest rates, potentially inhaling millions of particles daily, compared to maybe 10,000 a day in the US or Canada.
So they get inside, then what? Where do they go? Does our body just flush them out?
That's the worrying part. The implication is our body's defenses might be overwhelmed. Once they're in, these particles can travel. Microplastics can get into the bloodstream. From there, they can reach vital organs, lungs, liver, and really alarmingly, research from the University of New Mexico found high concentrations accumulating in human brain tissue.
In the brain?
Yes. Levels around 4,800 micrograms per gram, which was significantly higher than in other organs they looked at. This obviously raises huge questions about links to neurodegenerative diseases like dementia. And remember, the nanoplastics. Their tiny size makes them potentially even more toxic because they might be able to cross the blood-brain barrier, that protective shield our brain has. We already know microplastics have been detected in human blood, in lung tissue, even in breast milk. Biophysicist Wei Min described how nanoparticles can potentially get into the blood and be transported to vital organs. Shirley Mason used that vivid image. Little pieces of plastics between the synapses of your brain.
That's a terrifying thought.
It is. And the concern is that plastics don't easily break down. They could persist in our bodies indefinitely, meaning the risks just accumulate over our lifetime.
Okay, wow. Plastic in our brains. So what about direct health impacts? Is there clear evidence they're actually causing harm?
The research is still relatively new, but yes, the evidence pointing to adverse effects is definitely growing, and it's concerning. These particles aren't just inert bits floating around. They seem to be biologically active. Lab studies, like in vitro studies, show they can get inside cells, trigger the production of reactive oxygen species. Those are damaging molecules, cause inflammation, neurotoxic effects, even cytotoxicity, meaning they can kill cells.
So they damage cells directly?
It appears so. The digestive system seems particularly vulnerable. We're talking potential oxidative stress, maybe blockages, damage to the gut lining, messing up our gut bacteria balance, which could link to things like IBD, inflammatory bowel disease. If inhaled, they can lodge in the lungs, potentially causing issues like asthma. There are also concerns about reproductive damage, impaired growth. But here's another critical aspect. They act like tiny toxic sponges.
What do you mean?
They absorb and transport other hazardous chemicals. Think endocrine disruptors like phthalates and BPA. Those hormone-mimicking chemicals or toxic metals like lead, cadmium, arsenic, these get stuck to the plastic, and then the plastic carries them into our bodies. These absorbed chemicals are linked to growth problems, reproductive issues, and that's on top of any toxic additives already in the plastic itself.
So they're harmful on their own, and they carry other toxins.
Exactly. It's a double whammy. And now, research is starting to connect the dots to chronic diseases. They've found microplastics in human arteries, associated with a higher risk of heart problems, heart attacks, strokes. Living near heavily polluted oceans might even increase risk for things like type 2 diabetes. Neurologically, beyond just general toxicity, the UNM research points towards potential links with dementia, maybe even changing how we think. There's also concern about cancer outcomes, effects on stem cells, bone marrow, and the immune system. They might disrupt immune function, potentially leading to allergies, especially maybe for children exposed in the womb. Scientists are even coining new terms. Plasticosis is one describing how microplastics actually alter cell behavior inside organs. One writer called it an invasive entity residing within all living things.
Plasticosis.
Yeah, it really raises profound questions about the long-term, widespread, and potentially very disruptive effects these particles could have on human health across the board.
Okay, so let's try and wrap our heads around this. What does it all mean for us? We've heard about the shocking levels in bottled water, hundreds of thousands of nanoparticles, the surprising contamination from paint on glass bottle caps, the thousands leaching from hot drink cups, and the health implications. They're truly alarming. Ingested, inhaled, accumulating in our brains, blood, breast milk, crossing the blood-brain barrier. They're not inert. They cause cell damage, inflammation, carry toxins, and they're being linked to major chronic diseases, cardiovascular, neurological, maybe cancer, allergies.
Yeah, and when you connect all that to the bigger picture, the sheer scale of plastic production and waste makes it clear this isn't just about individual choices. While reducing personal plastic use is definitely worthwhile, this is fundamentally a systemic problem. It demands huge shifts in industry and material science and how we manage waste in public policy. And that lesson from Thaladone really comes back here, doesn't it? It hammers home the importance of that precautionary principle. We have to understand the long-term health effects before things become this widespread. Ultimately, a collective, global effort is absolutely essential if we want to mitigate this invisible threat and protect public health now and for future generations.
So here's something to leave you with. Knowing now that microplastics aren't just out there in the environment, but truly within you, potentially altering your cells, impacting your long-term health. How might this change your perception of everyday choices, and perhaps more importantly, what you expect in terms of broader systemic action?